In this lesson, we'll be planning out the main areas of our building using AutoCAD and the text brief. Now, I've gone and copy-pasted the text from that brief into our CAD file just so that we don't have to go forward and backwards between that other document. And if you zoom into it, you'll have a look. It has a whole bunch of figures as to what the components of our building should consist of in terms of the size. Now, it does give a square meter value. It doesn't say how long or how wide any of these spaces should be, so we need to use just the figures in terms of what's provided as a starting point for our designs. Now what we're going to do is essentially draw a rectangle with the correct area, and then we're going to have a look at how big it is and how it could fit onto our site. Now I'm going to start drawing them. Let's create a new layer first of all. So I'm going to call this layer Areas and quickly give it a new color. Then I'm going to turn off the context and make that area layer the current one. Now, let's start off with the first one. The barge is already done, so we'll skip that. We have 3,000 square meters of open plan space. Now, you can take out a calculator and do a quick square root of it to see what the square would be if it was a perfect square. It amounts to about 55 square meters per side. So I'm going to make it slightly more rectangular using the figures of 40 by 75. So let's now in AutoCAD quickly create a rectangle. So REC enter and type in D enter for the dimensions. And I'm going to manually type in 75 by 40. I have to add a string of 3 zeros because it's in millimeters. Enter, and there we have our first block. Now this is going to be labeled Expo Space, so let's create a MT enter, which is a multi-text object, and this is going to be called Expo Space. Also the size, you may have to increase it. So let's go and do that. Now I'm going to manually scale it up using the SC command, and I'm going to scale it up 5 times and twice again, just until I'm happy with the actual size. Now this is going to be the first block of Expo Space. Now obviously it doesn't all have to be on one level, it doesn't have to have this aspect ratio, but already it just in my mind gives me an idea of how big that Expo Space should be sitting on this platform. Now I'm going to pause the video at this stage and just quickly do the rest on the list, the 800, the 35, etc. And then we'll come back to all of the different squares, have a look at them together, and we'll discuss how they should fit together and how we should start planning out our areas. So here we have all of the areas complete, and what we can see if we just zoom out and have a look at it in conjunction with the actual plinth itself, the barge, we can start to get an idea of how big this outdoor space should be. So we can go and place it onto the actual site, and we can say, well, if we had to build a building as a tower on this end, we could have all of this open, and we could perhaps cantilever a part of the building over this outdoor space, or we could take half of this outdoor space and put it on top of the roof. So you can go and cut them up and basically start thinking in your mind as to how big these spaces need to be. So for example, the Expo Space, this can also be divided into 2 levels, or it can be as one. So already if I do this, I can see that if I wanted to have a raised building up on columns, I could have this Expo Space that is overhanging the outdoor area and it would all fit in. For example, the back of a house, this includes all of the bathrooms, the storerooms, the fire escapes, all of the store areas that basically feed onto the actual main spaces. So this would be most likely broken down into many small pockets of spaces throughout the entire building, but we just want to understand at a very large scale what percentage of the entire usable space is being catered for by this back of house. Then we also have the offices, which would most likely include the reception entrance areas, and this would most likely be somewhere close to the bottom where the entrance bridge is going to be onto our building. And then finally we have the auditorium, and we can start to see, if we just place this close onto the building, what portion of the entire site that takes up. So we can see that that is actually quite small. We can obviously change this shape, and we're going to do all of those things in 3D Max in the next lesson. So for now I'm just going to move all of these areas out, and I'm just going to leave them scattered around the site. Next, before you go and put them into 3D Max, if you do want to keep these text labels, you're going to need to explode that text. So let's select all these text objects and go to Express, Text, and Explode. And that will just convert them into simple polylines that you can go and put them into 3D Max and see that text. Also, if you don't need this here, you can also delete that if you've gone and created all of these areas. And the other thing I wanted to show you while we are in AutoCAD, just in case you are somebody that likes to do more of the planning at this AutoCAD stage instead of necessarily using 3D, once you do create polylines or any type of space that you may plan out in AutoCAD, remember that you have a few functions to see what the areas are. First of all, you can select the object and on your keyboard type Control-1 or even double click on the object, and you will get this information dialog box, and here you will have the area. Now my areas and my units are in millimeters, so you will just have to subtract 6 zeros, but basically this is 3,500 square meters. Then you can get exactly the same thing if you type in area, so AREA on your keyboard, right click, and then just manually point to all the areas, all the points that delimit the space, right click, and you will get that same figure here, 3,500 and then a string of 6 zeros. Now you can get the same thing if you click on the object and type list on your keyboard, enter, you will get this dialog which gives you much more information as well, including the perimeter and a few other things that you may find interesting. So there are a few tips like that that I can give you that can already help you to plan your spaces and to get yourself going. But the most important thing, the reason why we did this lesson is just so that you can visually see the size proportion in between your space that you're building on and the space that you're supposed to be fitting onto it. It's a little bit like putting an engine in a car. You need to know how many cylinders that engine's going to be, so you need to know how much space that frame is going to need to accommodate. So let's jump now to the next lesson where we're going to be merging this into our 3D Max scene. We're then going to be having a look at the volumes of these areas, and then we're going to start planning out our spaces. And we're also going to do a test render within 3D Max so that we can print it out and do some rough conceptual sketching to get our design started. So all of that is happening in the next lesson, so hang around for that.